So welcome back to my channel. Anyway, so I'm commenting on the fact that this Russian court of this puppet state they've established in East Ukraine sentenced three foreign soldiers to death the other day, one Moroccan and two Britishers, because they'd enlisted in the Ukrainian armed forces. So Russia's been illegally occupying some of Ukraine for over 8 years, some of Luhansk and Donetsk districts, as well as the Crimean Peninsula. So these courts, they have no standing, there has no legality, and illegal authority cannot establish a court of law. And until very recently, not even Russia recognized the so-called Donbass People's Republic and Luhansk People's Republic, which are simply adjuncts of Russia. So anyway, these three men were lawfully fighting, had enlisted in the Ukrainian armed forces, and many armies allow non-citizens to join them, including Russia, which has got Tajiks and Kyrgyz citizens serving in its ranks, and nobody objects about that. But Ukraine is no exception. It has allowed non-Ukrainians to volunteer for its armed forces. There's no question that they were fighting lawfully, that they were soldiers, they're not mercenaries fighting in a lawful war, a defensive war against Russia's illegal war of aggression, which was judged so by the International Court of Justice, a 13-2 majority verdict by the bench, and that's the first war in history to be ruled illegal. It is that flagrantly illegal on one side only by these aggressors. And obviously, Russia's aggressed other of its neighbors in recent decades, for example, Georgia and Moldova. So this is a kangaroo court, and I don't think rules of evidence were observed. I'm not aware that they had proper legal counsel and so on. I don't know if their human rights were respected whilst in custody. I'd be very surprised. Stalin, it's revived Stalinist era legislation. Stalin, one of being the most prolific mass murderers of all time. So the men who've been sentenced to death, the two Britons are Aidan Aslin and Sean Penn, 48, and a Moroccan gentleman, Saud, studying in Ukraine at the outbreak. So there's no question they're not mercenaries. I know mercenary activity is illegal, but I'm not aware it's a death penalty offence anywhere. As these countries, as Donetsk and Luhansk are effectively extensions of Russia, and Russia declared a moratorium on the death penalty in 1995, presumably this would be illegal under Russian law anyway. Russia has ratified the European Convention of Human Rights, which means they can't use the death penalty. Now they've been expelled from the Council of Europe for their crimes in Ukraine. Now they could withdraw from the European Convention of Rights, or obviously articles thereof, and indeed revive capital punishment. And their former president Dmitry Medvedev has boasted that this would be a golden opportunity. But it looks like there's going to be an appeal. So, but will they actually be executed by a firing squad? I mean, I think it unlikely, certainly in the short term, because they are pawns. Putin thinks he can gamble them away. He thinks that Britain will do anything to stop this. Say, well, if I give you these two guys, you've got to stop arming the Ukrainians. And the United Kingdom must say a very firm no to that. Obviously, I want these men's lives to be saved, but they volunteered to go and fight. You know, hats off to them. They have 100 times more courage than I do. You know you can be killed in combat, and you could be killed after you're captured. Obviously, it's illegal to kill prisoners of war. There's the Geneva Convention, there's no question they were prisoners of war. They're not terrorists, they're not mercenaries. They were proper soldiers in a lawfully recognized army. Even Ukraine recognized even Russia recognized the Ukrainian army as a real army. Captured in uniform, not accused of having committed any war crimes, except there's a completely bogus allegation that they were mercenaries. Now, it's Russia which has thousands of mercenaries abroad, part of the Wagner group. So Wagner, they've been fighting in the Central African Republic, in Mali, and elsewhere, in Mozambique, in Syria, in Libya. Now, fair enough, sometimes they've been hired by lawful governments, such as in Mali and the Central African Republic, but sometimes they haven't, such as in Libya. Mercenary activity is unlawful under Russian law, but despite that, Wagner operates openly on an enormous scale. They're almost always veterans of the Russian army, sometimes the Belarusian army and the Serbian army. So some people say it's effectively an unofficial part of the Russian army, but nevertheless it's against Russian law, so Russia violates its own laws, and this is what they'll always do. They'll always accuse the victims of the crimes that they are themselves are committing. So, but what if Russia does execute these men? Will it harden the Western will to resist? A prisoner exchange, yes, but Russia doesn't want 1 for 1. They'd want 2 for 1, 3 for 1. They want more of their people to be released, or they'd want dissidents, Russian dissidents who fled to Ukraine, been granted Ukrainian citizenship. They want that because they think the British are cowards. They will do anything to save the lives of their men, and therefore Britain will to hand over Russia. I don't want these men to be executed, but I don't think the UK should really jeopardize Ukrainian security for the sake of saving these guys. I hope that doesn't sound harsh. I don't want to kill them, and if there's any wrongdoing, it's on Putin's head, and that of his terrorists in Luhansk and Donbass. Because if you're fighting unlawfully, this unlawful authority like the Donetsk People's Republic or the Donbass People's Republic against a democratic and lawful state such as Ukraine, well, that is terrorism. Under the Terrorism Act, unlawful violence in any part of the world in furtherance of any political, national, religious, or other ideological cause, that is terrorism. Um, so Russia is obviously a country which is notorious for the opacity of its judicial proceedings, very often having in-camera trials where torture is very widespread, where state murder is very widespread. Obviously, they committed numerous atrocities against their own citizens, such as in Chechnya, deliberately setting off apartment block bombs in Voronezh and Moscow and various other cities in 1999, murdering its own citizens and foreigners abroad, and poisoning and so on. So this is a terrorist state, I'm afraid to say. Not saying that most Russians are terrorists, no, but they're victims of it. Those are not actually killed, tortured, imprisoned unlawfully. They have their public money stolen and so on. They have their right to freedom of expression taken away from them. It's a heavily oppressive state. Um, so Anyway, so the Russian army captured them and supposedly gave them to the Donetsk People's Republic to put on trial. So Putin would like to extract the maximum possible concessions for this, and the UK must say no, even if it means these men get killed. And I don't want them to be killed, but the blame would be on Russia. That Russia will be culpable for this because this is a war. Tens of thousands of people are being killed already. Tens of thousands and more are going to be killed, and therefore Western countries cannot jeopardize victory for the sake of saving 2 or 3 lives. That is the frank calculation has to be made. You can't cause so many more people to be killed for the sake of saving these three, and that's it. I think probably more death sentences will be forthcoming. So we shall see what's going to happen, because there might be quite a negative reaction if they're killed, but then Russia might think, well, that will scare off other foreign volunteers. But I mean, the foreign volunteers are not idiotic. They know this is a war. Almost all of them have been soldiers in other armies before they joined the Ukrainian army. So I don't think they're too put off, and that they realize this is not a game. People really get killed on a huge scale. People really get wounded, maimed for life, having limbs blown off, being blind, deaf, and horrifically scarred. Having their spines broken, things like that. So this is serious, and only to go into it if you really are willing to risk life and limb, and the chance of serious injury or death is high. I wouldn't say it's over 50%, but I think it's considerable that you're going to suffer some sort of injury. Even if it doesn't happen to you, you're going to see it happen to some of your comrades. Anyway, so that is my comment on that one. Thanks for watching the channel. Bye.